Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be talking about foldable phones with myself, Fraser, Jamie,
Hello.
and Aaron. Okay, we're going to start off by talking about kind of the first the first proper foldable phone which actually worked, and that was the Samsung Galaxy Fold 1. Jamie, do you want to start talking about that?
Definitely. So, in terms of folding phones, I really like the design of this the best. I think the execution wasn't the best, but the idea was definitely a novel one, and it's just way more useful than some other phones. The idea of having a tablet in a phone-shaped format really works, as you can just slip it in your pocket, and when you open it, you have a tablet. Now, there is some things that I would change. For instance, have a much bigger screen when the phone is shut in the smaller format. It's extremely finicky, and you can't do anything with that, which means you kind of have to open it every time, which isn't the easiest thing to do, or the most.
Just kind of on that, Jamie, you said at the start there having a tablet in kind of a phone form factor when it's folded up. Is this really necessary? Do we need a tablet in our pockets?
Well,
Because if you want a phone, you buy a phone. If you want a tablet, you buy a tablet.
But what if you could get both?
Then just get like a
in one?
Galaxy Note.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I mean,
if you wanted to watch a movie on your tablet, on your phone, it's like a couple of inches across and a bit more on the side.
So move
like,
it closer into your face.
but it's more the fact that they're hugely expensive for
Yeah, and they're like so thick.
they're the Galaxy Fold 1 that was basically the size of two phones together when it was folded. And when it was folded, you had a screen which was what you expect from an iPhone in 2015. It was a tiny screen. So I mean, it is extremely impractical in that sense.
I completely agree. The execution was not the best. In fact, it wasn't good. I definitely would not buy that phone. The screen was not. The screen on the outside was way too small. The screen on the inside, the form factor, I don't know exactly what it is, but it was more of a square shape, which doesn't fit with any of the 16:9 or 4:3. No, it's more 4:3 like in the olden days, and this doesn't really work. But and the screen, its physical self, people had warnings about don't touch it too hard or else you'll break it. That's completely unacceptable for a mass-produced phone in 2019.
And also the fact that it was a plastic screen. Like, we've kind of all become accustomed to these really kind of nice feeling, kind of durable glass screens, whereas this was it felt just like a cheap phone. It had a cheap plastic screen.
Yeah, and you couldn't even put a protector on it because it could damage the screen. And
exactly.
Maybe we should talk about perhaps when the review units came to reviewers, there was like a mass problem, as the screen was completely broken because there was an inbuilt screen protector, but if you took that off, it basically completely broke the screen. But there was no warning labels or anything, and the screen would completely break. Which, I mean, like, if you dropped it, or you got a bit of gravel or dust in on the inside underneath the screen, because it was quite a large gap. I mean, it just the endless things that could go wrong with the first Galaxy Fold.
And then kind of talking about bad foldable phones, we're going to go to the Royal Flex Pi, which in quite a few respects was just a failure. It was didn't have the specs to stand up to, I think it was a 2018, 2019. It didn't have the specs to cope with kind of like a 2019, 2018 phone, and it just wasn't executed very well at all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like the screen was rubbish, the internals were even worse, and to top it all off, it was made by a company who had basically no experience making any type of phones, let alone foldable phones.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they might have gone bankrupt making this, and there was a little bit of demand, and they could not keep up with it at all, and I'm pretty sure the entire thing just flopped, which was.
And also, just kind of talk about the form factor, is when it was folded up, it wasn't like rectangular in any regard. It was more, it had a massive gap, as you can kind of see there. It has just like a huge gap.
It didn't even close properly.
Exactly. And also, lots of people didn't like the fact, other than different to Samsung Galaxy Fold, where the screen was on the outside rather than the inside. So it folded to the back. People thought that with these really vulnerable screens, putting them on the back would just make it more prone to breaking.
Definitely very vulnerable there.
And then kind of moving on to a different form factor, we have the Galaxy Fold 2, which is more of the clamshell design, which is kind of what a foldable phone originally was. It's a phone which is small. You open it up, it's a much bigger phone. So it's not a foldable tablet, it's a foldable phone. For me, I prefer this kind of form factor because it's sort of like an old foldable phone where you'd flick up the top, and so it makes the phone actually smaller. It makes it more easy to pocket it.
Well, I don't really like this as well. I would much prefer the tablet into a phone, because all our pockets are basically perfectly phone sized, or our phones are pocket sized, and there is no point, because this is going to basically take up the same amount of space inside your pocket, because you're not going to put something on top of your phone. There isn't going to be that much more space, and the fact that it's super tall, and so when you're opening it, it's super skinny and tall, like it's being stretched out. And I also don't like the front screen, because it basically is just a little, maybe an inch by, I don't know, a quarter of an inch screen, which you can't barely see the time on, and I really don't like that at all.
Well, in my opinion, I would say that it's just like a much more practical way to do a folding phone, because it allows you to, make your phone smaller and more compact, and you've got that little screen on the front, so you can see little, time notifications. And then because phones are getting bigger, and the issue is, you can't really just start making pockets bigger without them, looking weird. So the solution would be to, fold the phone so it would be smaller, as opposed to, folding it so it would come out bigger.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think this is a much more kind of practical approach to the future of phones, that it kind of folding up into, it's twice as thick, but it's like half as small. And it also means that the most vulnerable bit of the phone, which is the screen on any phone, means that it's not facing outwards. Because if you put your phone in the same pocket as your keys, your phone's going to get all scratched up. The glass on the front, the front of your phone. Whereas with this, your screen is protected, so you won't have kind of massive scratches in your phone from keys. You can put your keys and phone in the same pocket.
Well, I do like this phone, apart from the fact that it folds down. I think it'd be a lot more practical if it folded more like a book. So it'd be kind of pencil thin, not pencil thin, but definitely longer than skinnier.
And then I just kind of talking about kind of the screen, is that Samsung claimed it to be a glass screen, which, as people started getting the phone, realized it wasn't.
Well, just on top of that is that it's not that it wasn't a glass screen, but they marketed it as a glass screen in a way that made people think it was like a traditional phone glass screen. What people found is there was glass on the screen, but it was under a layer of plastic on the top, meaning that the glass was nearly completely pointless to have there in the first
And
place.
it was a non-removable layer of plastic, unlike
Yeah.
most phones come
Yeah.
with a removable
Screen
plastic
protector.
screen protector.
Yeah.
And also the brushes inside, the imagery when they were presenting the phone made it look like there was like an entire sweeping, swirling system, but it's literally just like a couple of brushes, like a couple of hairs that really didn't live up to the expectations of the presentation.
Exactly. And then kind of moving off Samsung to Huawei, which this year released their Mate X phone, which many are kind of saying is the best foldable phone out there, which kind of takes a similar design cue or kind of idea as the FlexPi, as having the screen on both sides, but kind of executes it in a much better way.
I'm not loving it.
Yeah, I still think there's the issue that it's just the screen is so vulnerable to scratches, it being plastic, and the fact that that's on the outside, it means you're guaranteed to get, scratches or damage to the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's 360 really. Like where are you supposed to put a case if it falls or anything? Like there's glass all around. It's just extremely vulnerable, as Aaron said.
Yeah, definitely. But it was kind of a sort of a revolutionary phone in a sense for foldable phones, because they managed to make the foldable phone, when it's folded, the size of a regular phone. And they did this by kind of putting all the technology in a little notch at the end, a vertical notch going up the side of the phone, and then just putting batteries underneath the screens. So they managed to make something like the Galaxy Fold, which is like the size of two phones sandwiched together, managed to make it the size of just a slightly bigger regular phone.
I quite like this form factor, as I said earlier, about a normal phone opening up into a tablet, but I just don't think the execution here was on point. I much prefer the Galaxy Fold original one, but with a bigger screen on the outside. I think that's the way that foldable phones should go in the future.
Okay, and then moving on from this kind of back to a clamshell design was the Motorola Razr. And the Motorola Razr kind of it wasn't very well executed, had really bad internals and everything, but it was this kind of idea that is bringing you back to the old Motorola.
It had a
Razr.
lot of hype.
Yeah, it had way too much hype and they didn't really deliver.
I mean, like, I just don't understand the appeal of the massive notch at the bottom. Like, it's completely unnecessary. They just put it in there for old time's sake. And the screen was, again, not the best. Like, none of the screens have been good with the folding phones, but this one was particularly disappointing.
Yeah, but I suppose it's the way it folded, because I quite like the vertical phone making it smaller. This one did it quite well, because it fit in the same form factor as the original Motorola Razr, which made it it was just like nice in the way that this is probably the best kind of vertical folding type phone we've seen. Whereas if they could iron out the problems that the non-folding issues with the internals and with the screen, then I think they could have had a successful folding phone.
I think the one saving grace of this phone was it came in a really cool box.
Yeah.
It did. You could. It came in quite a cool triangular box, which is quite it's quite futuristic, very kind of similar to the Asus ROG phone, how that came packaged.
But I think the only reason why this phone got so much hype was because it resembled the old Motorola.
But I mean, the original Moto Razr was a phone which it was revolutionary in a sense. Like, it was the phone to have, and that's why they're then bringing out kind of a second rendition of it, was supposed to be this all-inspired thing. Maybe this was the phone which would revolutionize phones as we know it. So, because they did that originally. So I think many people thought that this was going to be the new phone, like this, they're going to revolutionize how phones are made. And as we kind of knew, it had an outdated camera, outdated specs, a huge notch, a huge bump at the bottom, and again, a bad screen. So it didn't really deliver.
Yeah, completely. The only reason this was popular was because it resembled the phone of the past, which I don't think it's a good model to go after. You know, it worked 20 years ago. Why doesn't it work today? Because, you know, the world's a completely different place.
So the one thing that was good is their external screen on the phone was, you know, one of the better ones for this kind of phone, because it was, you know, a lot sharper and clear, and you could clearly read everything, and it was like a nice size to have as like just for showing the time and notifications.
It worked a lot better than kind of the Samsung Fold 2, which had this small little, almost camera-sized...
The size of your finger.
Yeah. But whereas this was like a fully fledged screen. It was only, I think it's only 2.3 inches, but it's still good enough to read the time, read notifications without folding up your phone.
Yeah, definitely. I think the outside screen was definitely one of its saving graces.
Just kind of going back to kind of the inside screen there, with the Galaxy Fold 1 and kind of the Royal FS the Matex, all that sort of stuff, most of them had a vertical crease down the middle just because the way it folded. But whereas with the Galaxy 2 and the Razr, they had this crease kind of horizontally across the phone, which lots of people were quite upset about, because it's really in the way when it's kind of horizontally across your screen, right in the middle. Whereas with the if on a kind of a book folding one, it would just be, it's kind of thin and it just goes down the center of the screen.
Also, with the crease, I think the Motorola, they didn't have as much of a crease, and I think people quite like that. But the drawback of not having as much of a crease was when it folded, the screen came away from the actual body, which meant like all sorts of dust and little stuff can get into the phone, which is completely a terrible idea.
I think that's kind of a huge issue with foldable phones, along with the screen, but also kind of their vulnerability to water, dust, all that sort of stuff. Because in the end of the day, these are going to go in your pockets, and nobody's pockets is like fully clean. They're always going to have a bit of dust in there, and I think it's quite unrealistic for a phone to not be able to put up with kind of everyday dust or everyday kind of moisture.
If it can't survive in your pocket, it's not going to survive in the market. You know, people aren't going to buy it. It's just not sustainable.
And then some phones which kind of go away from the folding design. It is still a folding phone, but it doesn't have a folding screen. Is the LG G8X ThinQ. Quite a long name there. But what this phone did, you could get an external case for it, which you put the phone in, and you would then have two screens, two fully working screens. But it did have a massive kind of bezel in between the two screens, but it still kind of worked.
I think this is quite a lazy attempt to jump on the folding phone hype. I mean, they barely even tried. They just put two phones together and they go, bam, look, we made a folding phone. I feel like they definitely didn't try at all.
I think kind of the draw to this was, one, you had your regular stylus screen, but two, kind of more importantly, it was much cheaper than any other phone out there. I think this phone retailed for about $800, give or take, whereas the Galaxy Fold The first
Nearly
Fold
like
was
1500.
2000.
Yeah.
And then the second Galaxy was, I think, 1200. So this
Yeah,
was
I
kind of
think
a
that,
cheaper
yeah.
alternative.
I think I was watching maybe 2 years ago the actual live stream of Samsung unveiling the first folding phone, their first folding phone, and I was reading through the live comments, and everyone was like, "This is really cool, but holy, it's expensive. No one's ever gonna buy that."
Yeah.
And I think that was
Definitely.
the general mood, and in fact still is across the market and the consumers at the moment.
Well, one thing I suppose, like the LG's dual screen phone wasn't trying to, do the things the other phones were doing, where it'd be smaller or you fold it out to a tablet. It was made more as, this was a phone you could use for like multitasking. You could have, two tabs easily opened at the same time.
I think that's
Definitely.
definitely an advantage there.
But I mean, they're not kind of the first phone to do it. You had the Asus ROG, which
Yeah.
kind of did this for gaming. And so it felt like you're it's almost like a DS sort of aesthetic.
Yeah.
Where you would have two screens. Like one is where you'd have your joysticks, and then the screen where you'd be actually playing the game. So kind of in a way, it's bringing you back to back to your DS days.
Yeah.
Exactly, but just like the one with the LG, it's not exactly a folding phone. It's just two phones put together and go voila.
Exactly, yeah. Then there's a couple of other phones which kind of have announced either folding phones or at least flexible display phones. Lenovo brought out one. It was more of a concept more than anything, but I didn't really see. It's quite an odd aesthetic for a phone. It's a bit like the Royal Flex Pi, apart from it folds up, but doesn't even fold up like in the clamshell design, but doesn't really do it very well because the folding bit isn't really the size of the screen. So there's just this little bit of the screen at the top. It doesn't really make much sense.
Was this like an actual thing they created, or is it
No,
just
I
a
believe it's
concept?
just like a concept design they were going for, but it's definitely one of like the most like ridiculous concepts.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it here and it doesn't look right to me.
Yeah.
It looks a lot kind of very extremely flexible, way more flexible than any phone really has any right to be.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a sheet of paper instead of a slab of glass and metal.
And then Microsoft brought out their Surface Duo. I don't think this was really more of a foldable phone, more as kind of a workstation.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, like the Surface, but as opposed to having the folding down keyboard, you had, like the folding out other display.
I really think they could have tried harder on this.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
The bezels on the top were just ridiculous, oversized, completely unnecessary in this modern age, where every phone doesn't even need a bezel.
I think what they're trying to do is, I don't think it was more kind of supposed to be revolutionary. I think it was just supposed to be kind of it was kind of a workstation. And I totally agree with like the bezels are huge. It looks like an iPhone 5 almost with the huge bezels. But I think, and also the hinge was completely different for any foldable phone out there. It's like a proper hinge rather than the kind of revolutionary ones which we saw, the Galaxy Folds or or even the Royal Flex Pis.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that we've all said what we all need to say about that. Really, it's just not really a viable contender for folding
exactly.
phone.
Yeah. I think that's it for kind of foldable phones.
Well, maybe we should talk about future folding phones, especially maybe Apple.
Oh yeah.
I think Apple aren't going to be the leaders, especially at the forefront of foldable technology, as we all know that Apple are never the first to do anything.
Well, not anymore, at least.
Especially, they had quite some early successes, and now they're kind of sitting back, resting on their laurels.
But I mean, lots of people have kind of thought. I don't think it's actually going to happen, but lots of people are kind of thinking that the iPhone. Well, we're thinking anyway that the iPhone 12 is going to be a folding phone, which kind of would either take the aesthetic of the tablet design or kind of the clamshell design.
I think Apple is definitely not going to be releasing a foldable phone anytime soon. They'll be letting Samsung and the other competitors work out, all the problems before they release one, because they don't want to be saying, "Oh, look at Apple's phone, it's ridiculous." There's all these problems with it. They're like, also Apple's entire marketing is ours is premium. If you buy our phones, our tablets,
and also kind of
you get the best experience.
Also, kind of what Apple do, which is quite clever, is instead of spending years doing research and development on it, which is what Samsung were doing, they kind of wait until other companies have perfected it through their research and development, and then just kind of come out with almost a better one.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then kind of there's quite a few other. Well, we can't really talk about foldable phones without kind of acknowledging the Escobar foldable phones,
sure.
which weren't really the phones in themselves. They were just redesigned. Firstly, the redesigned Royal Flex Pi, and then the Galaxy Fold.
I mean, a complete scam, obviously.
Yeah.
They just sent them to reviewers, and then when real people tried to buy them, they just take the money and leave. Like, never send them a phone. I mean, like, on their website, their marketing director, it says marketing director, head of assassinations. I mean, like, you can't really take any company seriously if it has that.
Definitely, yeah. I think foldable phones, for me, I don't think they're really going to become. They probably are going to become a sort of norm, but I don't think they're ever really going to be mainstream.
Well, I feel like it's not going to.
They're kind of a novelty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's cool, but could have been
foldable phones at the moment, especially, are just kind of for companies to show that we're able to do it. We have the technology to do this. I think that's kind of what Samsung were originally going for, because no one's really going to spend €2,000 on a phone, or realistically, because it's not really one for consumers, but it's just so that they're able to prove that we're the first to do this, we're able to do it.
Well, I feel like that
when Apple the future is it's probably going to be like $5,000 or something.
Yeah. Well, we do kind of see that with the general
people will buy it.
A general kind of thing, but phones have been going up in costs from years. I used to be able to buy a kind of a flagship phone for about £500, but now you have to spend upwards of 1,000 or even 1,200 in the case of the S20 Ultra. So,
but no one, people only buy the S20 Ultra to show they have disposable income. People who want the best phone, who can't be bothered to about that much money. But people, the most selling Samsung phones are the A50s and the A70s.
Yeah.
And that's where they actually get most of their profit from.
And also just kind of I think phones do go down a lot of value, especially with plans. If you get a bill pay plan, you're able to get the phone at a fraction of the cost, but you just have to pay a certain premium each month. So some people do that. Like, you can buy the I think it's the S20 Ultra in Vodafone for £200 up front, but then it's I think £50 a month to pay it off.
I mean, but no one's gonna buy €50 a month. It's quite a lot.
Yeah.
Money. But I suppose you do get unlimited data and calls and stuff. So I suppose it could be worthwhile, especially if you have a good income coming in. You know,
Yeah.
obviously.
I would.
Perhaps foldable phones will go down in kind of in their cost as soon as it becomes the norm, because at the moment it is this sort of just kind of proof that they're able to do it. But whereas when technology just kind of keeps evolving, it's going to eventually get cheaper. So perhaps in the future we'll be able to buy a foldable phone for perhaps 1,000 or even less.
Oh, I think they're going to probably go the way that phones have now. It's going to be like the super high-end foldable phones with all the latest stuff, and then there's going to be probably low-end, like maybe a plastic screen like we see now. But I'm not seeing this in the next couple of years. Maybe
Yeah,
in the 2030s they might come the norm, but I don't see anyone forking out for $1,000 just to go, oh look, it takes up less room in my pocket.
well, that does actually kind of beg an interesting question: is do we really need foldable phones?
Well,
Like-
in my opinion, I would say that foldable phones may not be the future, but I'd say the technology behind the folding displays could be applied in something like low profile, like more like low profile smartwatches and
Yeah,
stuff like that. Because with flexible displays, you can have them much bigger and low profile, whereas currently smartwatches would be limited to the same kind of design as old school watches. Whereas with the improvements made in foldable displays for folding phones, that could easily be applied to smartwatches with their and having the ultra thin flexible display. You could have that just nearly wrap around the entire wrist.
yeah,
I mean, like, smartphones have definitely been trying to get a big product, like a phone, inside your pocket. But like, this could have amazing repercussions for maybe TVs. I mean, like, imagine a
Definitely,
foldable
yeah.
TV where you could, I don't know.
Well, you kind of see that already. Is that quite a few companies have adopted a sort of folding screens for TVs. Like like LG were the first ones to come out with their curved glass display on their curved TVs. But there is TVs coming out in the future which will roll up. I think LG made that it's a rollable television, so it takes up hardly any room on your mantelpiece, but then it rolls up and you've got a fully fledged TV.
Especially portable TVs.
Exactly, that sort of thing there up on the screen, where it sort of rolls out of a box, so it's taking up hardly any room when you're not using it, but when you fold it out, you've got a TV.
Yeah, I think this is a definite potential. Has
just
definite potential.
just kind of going back to phones there, is that we kind of, especially when they had less kind of technologically advanced phones with buttons, people strive to make the phones smaller and smaller, that they're supposed to be really easy to pocket. We're kind of seeing the opposite with smartphones, where they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think perhaps phones at the moment are just kind of the right size. I don't think they really need to get any bigger. Like, that's kind of why I kind of have an issue with the Galaxy Fold, the Fold 1 anyway, is that you don't really, if you want a tablet, you buy a tablet. If you want a phone, you buy a phone.
I think I have to disagree with you there. I think if we want a phone, I think that technology is going to evolve to a point where you can have a normal phone, but like it works functionally, it's the same thing as a normal phone. But say if you want it to watch TV, I don't know, unfold it and it's a massive screen. And that's what I'm talking about, TVs. You could turn your phone into a TV in the future, potentially, if folding technology reaches a certain point. And I think that's what I'm most excited for.
Definitely, yeah. Well, I think that's kind of the end of the thing today. Thanks for listening, everyone, and goodbye.